Are you a chiropractor with a struggling practice, having a hard time finding and keeping patients? Is your staff falling short of expectations? I'm Dr. Scott Sawyer, and DC Trainings has the answers that you need. So tune in now and find out how. Welcome to DC Trainings, everybody. I'm Dr. Scott Sawyer. It's great to be with you today. We're going to continue moving through Module 1, which is team development. And we are now in week 3, which is titled Initial Interviews. And again, I'm really happy to be with you today because I have to tell you this formula that I'm teaching you, or this sequence of steps, is so powerful for bringing exceptional talent into your office. I'm in full-time practice just like you, and yesterday was just an amazing day. We had lots of new patients, more than usual, but lots of new patients, and then we had all of our established patients. And because of the caliber of talent in my team, we were able to easily juggle these extra new patients and all the patient visits and not even miss a beat. There was no compromise in our patient care, in our level of service, in our teamwork. So it's nice when you have really well-trained people on your team, just like with any top sports team. I'm the chiropractor for the Warriors NBA basketball team, and when they have a game, everyone is expected to play at their best, and the only people that are going to be on the court are the people who have been predetermined to have the level of talent that's required to win that game. And that's all predetermined. And this is what I'm teaching you, is how to select top level talent and really determine their capabilities and their capacity to perform at the level that you need in your practice. Now, I know not all of you have really well-established practices at this point. You may be building your practice. Some of you have very successful practices and you've been in practice for years. So we're kind of covering the whole gamut, but I want to just give you that vision and that visual to think about, like, what if this was a top level NBA basketball game? Like, we would all need to be performing at our best at all times. And that's how I look at chiropractic. Chiropractic is so vitally important for everybody to receive, to maintain their best health through a fully functioning nervous system, that we all need to be at the top of our game to provide that level of chiropractic care so that the people on the receiving end can experience what we know as the highest quality of life and the highest capacity to perform at their best, and then do what they want to do and have great relationships and great fulfillment in their lives. So it all falls together, and it all starts with having a great team. So let's dive into this next section, which is, as I said, week 3 of team development. And we're going to talk about how this works in terms of furthering to filter, if you will, these resumes down and really see. Let's see. Sorry, I'm just doing a couple things here real quickly because I want to make sure. Oh, actually, it's already there. Okay, cool. Okay, just double checking my settings. But we're going to further filter, right? We started out with this huge list of resumes, and now we're taking that list. Let me just move this over a little bit here. There we go. Now we're taking that list and furthering the funnel down to ultimately select our A player to join our team. So here is our initial interviews. We started with attracting applicants. We then went to the application meeting, and hopefully you've been following along with each of those steps, but now we're going to take it to the next step. So in the initial interviews, I want to just kind of start this section with this. Have you ever rushed the hiring process in your practice because you were suddenly left shorthanded or short-staffed? Probably many of us have been in that position. Or have you ever hired somebody, actually made that decision, to later find out, unfortunately later, not before, later to find out that they were incapable of actually doing that which you hired them to do? Boy, what a gut-wrenching scenario that is, where you're just thinking, oh, I've really made the wrong decision here. So I don't want you to run into either one of those pitfalls. So today we're going to talk about how to organize questions to really ensure the best long-term fit. And we're going to use the format of a panel interview to do that while testing for, and here's the punchline, performance under pressure. See, all of us who've been in practice for a while know that our CAs need to perform under pressure. When there's patients in the office and you're busy, or there's a patient that comes in that's unhappy about something, there needs to be that ability to maintain your level of confidence even when doing it under pressure. So we're going to talk about how to do that, and a great way that you can test an applicant's ability to handle that type of a situation very easily early on in the interview process. So let's talk about this. So we're going to go through two parts of this, and I'll frame this because I want to just connect this to where we left off. Where we left off in the application meeting was that we had a whole bunch of people come in at one time for a group interview. And from those, we selected who was going to come back for the next step, which is the panel interview and the applicant test. That brings us to our topic today, which is initial interview. So there's two parts to this interview, this next interview. And what'll happen is you'll schedule two people at the same time to do this interview. There's two people at the same time. So let's say, our interview is going to be at 11 a.m. for this interview. At 11 a.m., we're going to schedule two, and you could make them 15 minutes, you could make them 30 minutes, depending on how much time you want to spend. I generally schedule them every 15 minutes because we do a lot of them in a short amount of time. But let's just suppose you're going to do it in 30 minutes, just to give yourself a little more time to learn this process. So two people would be scheduled per 30 minutes, meaning that at 11 a.m., there would be two interviews scheduled. The first one that comes in is going to go into take the applicant test. The second one that comes in, and they're both going to come in at the same time, is going to do the panel interview. And I apologize if you can hear that siren in the background, but the second one's going to come in and do the panel interview. Okay, so they both come in and we sort of split them in two directions. Now, you will need a person at the front desk who's not involved in the actual interview process during this step. So, if you have a patient that can help you out or a family member that can help you out, you need somebody at the front desk just to guide these applicants as they come in and give them the applicant test, while the core talent of your office, the doctor, the top CAs, the people who are already established in your office, will need to be present for the panel interview. Okay, so let's go through this and I'll show you how this process works. But just remember, we're having two people come at the same time. We're splitting them up into two different sections of the interview, and this is how it works. So, sorry, I've got to share my screen there. There it is. Okay, so let's talk about how this is going to work. We have the applicant test, which is the first step. Now, this is provided at the reception counter. So the person walks in. Thank you so much for coming. We're really glad that you're here. Please take a moment to fill this out front and back, and let's go ahead and get started. So it's provided at the reception counter, and it's timed for accuracy. That's why I like to schedule this every 15 minutes, because I want to know that this person can actually complete all the steps that they need to complete, within that set amount of time, right? That's going to be important. So let's go to, and I think I'll come back to the website and I'll show you what that looks like, because we actually have a sample of it. So that's the first part. They're doing the applicant test and it's timed. I'll add one more piece to that because they need to have access to a keyboard, right? Part of this applicant test means that they're going to be typing so that you can see their proficiency and their ability to be able to type, right? So make sure that that's part or that's set up as part of that first applicant test portion of the interview. Okay, so they're going to have the paper to fill out and they're going to have a computer to type at. The other part is with the panel interview, and that means that this applicant is going to go into a room, and I'll show you a picture of this, where they have one seat. And if you can picture this for a moment with me, sorry, there we go. The applicant's going to be sitting here, and then the panel of you are going to be sitting around them, right? So there's a panel, maybe it's you, doctor, and your PCA, and maybe a couple other CAs are all sitting in sort of a half circle around this one individual. Now, as I mentioned, there's going to be times where every CA in a successful practice needs to perform under pressure. And this is a great way to see how they handle that situation, because when that applicant walks in and sits down in the seat and there's 3 or 4 people, or at least 3 people, you may have to, again, get some family members to help you, but you need at least 3 people to be sitting in a half circle around, being and have each of them able to ask questions of this applicant in sequence. And what does that look like? That looks like a CA who's sitting at your reception counter and has a lobby full of patients, right? I mean, that's what they're doing. So this is a great way to test their ability to perform in that type of environment, right? So here's how it goes. We've got the applicant sitting there, and then we have the panel of 2 or 3 or 4 people sitting around them and asking these questions. So here's the flow. The doctor's going to ask 2 questions first. Then each person in the circle is going to follow up with just 2 questions each. Then it's going to finish with the doctor asking 1 or 2 more final questions. And then we give the applicant an opportunity to ask questions. At that point, they're dismissed. That's how fast it goes. So we're going to go 2 questions by the doctor, 2 questions by each CA, another final question or 2 by the doctor. Applicant, do you have any questions for us? No. Okay, great. Or yes, I do. Okay, let's answer those. And here we go. Now, I will say that oftentimes an applicant will ask questions about pay. And in my office, we keep that confidential. So if that question does come up, you can just let them know that you're a win-win office environment, and that will be discussed with them privately, because those numbers are kept confidential between employees based on talent and their individual skills. That's customized for each person. So we don't actually go over that in a open environment. And then you would just kind of push that aside and come back to that later. Obviously, that's something that people want to discuss, because they want to know, if I were to get this job, how much am I going to be paid? So just know that question will often come up, and there's a time and a place for that, but it's not in the panel interview. Okay. So that's those 2 steps. I mean, it's really that quick. We do the interview, we do the applicant test, then we switch. So what does that mean? The person who came in and is doing the written and typing test now switches with the person who just had the panel interview test, and they go in to do the typing and written test, while the person who was doing the typing and writing test is now going to do the panel interview test. And that's why, as I said, we schedule it pretty quickly. Now, if you want to go 30 minutes, that means that you're only going to have 15 minutes to do your panel interview. We actually do it even faster. We do it in roughly about 5 to 7 minutes. But that's okay. You don't have to do it that fast. But the key point of that is you want to make sure that you have that switch, because when the first person came in and they're doing their typing test and written test, and if they're done, and then you're still doing your panel interview test for who knows how long, right? Sometimes they can, if you get into a conversation, it can really drag on, and you may not even realize that the other person is done with their test. And you want to be punctual with this. You also don't want the hiring process to interrupt your general practice. And that's why we actually schedule them every 15 minutes. We want to make sure that, if we're going to do 10 or 15 panel interviews, which is not uncommon, then we're going to make sure that we knock them out every 15 minutes. We might get 5 or 6 or 7 of them done on one day, and then another 7 or 8 of them done on the next day. And in 2 days, we're done with all of our panel interviews with a big number of applicants, right? So again, that's why you want to just make sure that you have that sequence in place. Now, I'm going to go back to my screen, because you'll see here, after the applicants have left, then we further filter, right? We want to determine, well, did that person actually stay qualified? Are they still in the running for this position? And if not, then after they leave, we're going to, number one, we're going to send them an email with an applicant script if they're approved, which I'll show you this in a moment. If they're disqualified, then we're going to send them an applicant decline letter. So we're going to choose right after that panel interview, is this person a yes or is this person a no? And then we're going to separate them accordingly, so that the ones that are in the yes pile now go to the next step, which again, I'll teach you that in just a few minutes. So that's the two steps, or the two parts of the initial interviews. Let me jump over to the website and show you. Oh, sorry, I've got to just move a couple things here. Where did you go? Oh, okay, here it is. Okay, so let me just move this over and share my screen, because so here we are, we're on the website homepage, and here's our materials for this week. Now, there's not a lot of materials, and the reason for that is because this is just a really simple step, and each one of these steps in the process I'm showing you has a specific important outcome related to it. Very important. So we want to make sure we don't miss any steps as we go through this. So let's look at these materials, though, because here's your materials for this week. We also have on the website a demonstration of the panel interview, and we have the initial interview. I'm just going to pop up the panel interview real quick because I just want to show you the picture, because here is what it looks like if the camera is the applicant looking at this half circle of people, right? So if you can see my mouse, what I'm showing you here is that I'm sitting on the left, and then I have my 3 CAs. I'm going to ask 2 questions. Each of my CAs are going to ask 2 questions. It's going to come back to me for a follow-up question, and then we open it up for questions from our applicant. And that's the setting, right? So that's what that looks like. Now, what kind of questions are we asking? I know that's what you're thinking right now. Well, gosh, what am I supposed to even ask? Well, on here, we have our applicant test. So, sorry, little sidebar for a second, because this is the applicant test that the other applicant is going to be filling out while the panel interview is happening. So this applicant test is there for you. It has a filing section, obviously very important in a doctor's office. There's a spelling section, obviously important for any, any job, really. You got to know how to spell. And then there's also addition, prioritization, and transposition. So all these sections are on there as a way of testing their proficiency around these areas. On the back of that is the applicant test, and this is the typing test. So this is the part where they'll need to just sit down and type this out. Now, there's numbers in here too, and that's intentional, because what's really fun is to test somebody's ability to use a 10 key, right? I think in any of our offices, we want to make sure that we reconcile or we balance at the end of the day or the week or the month, so that we know what we collected over the counter matches what was actually posted into the system, or what came in insurance checks actually matches what's posted in the patient files. So numbers are a key part of any successful practice. So this is one of the areas that we like to test, because I can tell you that I've had CAs who were proficient with 10 key, and I've had CAs that were not. And boy, does that come in handy when somebody's proficient with 10 key and they can just type away on a 10 key with numbers and not have to look at the numbers, rather than hunting and pecking. So there's all of these specific testing components are built into this applicant test. Okay, really important. So we really like this, and I use it for all of my interviews when I'm hiring a new CA. Now, what's nice also is we've, of course, given you a sample of that. So you can see, what areas, sometimes there's some speed bumps or people run into problems. There's an applicant test sample there. And of course, we've given you those examples on there. So you can also type that out and just take a look at it. Lastly, though, this is where I was going to before. This is the the panel interview questions. So what we're going to be doing here, as I said, is we're going to be going through a flow where we ask specific questions. And I'm not going to read all these questions, but I'll read a couple of them because they're really relevant. One is, are you permanent in the area? Now, it takes a lot to hire the right new CA. So we want someone who can think on their feet and brings their best foot forward, but we also want somebody who's going to be permanent in the area, right? We want somebody who's not going to be moving away in 6 months or has not really secured a solid living environment and might potentially have to move because they don't have a solid living environment. Now, part of this might be through my own experience. I'm from Santa Cruz in California, which is a college town. So there's lots of people that apply for jobs who are students or who are entering college. and don't plan on staying in Santa Cruz long term. In other words, when they graduate college after either 2 or 4 years, they plan on moving back home or moving on away from Santa Cruz. So I'm sensitive about hiring somebody who might potentially be moving away in a year. I'm also sensitive about hiring somebody, as I said, who is potentially a student and doesn't really have a stable living environment, meaning that in a year or 2 years or 5 years from now, they might not still be living in the same place. So these are all things to consider. And I've gone through these with you in some of our previous webinars recently, where I talked about what the initial criteria were for the resumes that are sent to you when you do your first launch with the position being available. And one of those was, what are the criteria to filter those resumes down from that initial stack, if you will? And where I'm getting to with that is, one of those criteria was they need to live within a 30-minute commute of your office, even during rush hour, right? Now, if you have somebody who doesn't have a stable living environment, in other words, they're commuting an hour or more every day each way just to get to work or to get home, that can really be draining. And over time, you might have somebody that decides to leave your office simply because they don't want to spend that much time in the car every day just getting to and from work. So these are just some important considerations. And as you can see, it all connects together to build up and land you the best A player CA to join your team. Okay, so that's one question that always I ask. Are you permanent in the area? Where do you see yourself in 5 to 10 years? Another one is, if we were to hire you, describe your personal talents that would benefit this company, right? I mean, that's just something it kind of puts somebody on the spot, but if somebody's proud of their accomplishments and they're self-confident, they'll be able to answer that question relatively easily. Another one is this number 2, where my CA would ask, if you describe a complex situation where you had to learn a lot quickly, how did you do it and how successful were you? Now, when they join a chiropractic practice, things can be busy and there's a lot to learn really fast. So we want to have somebody who's been in that environment before, where they don't buckle under pressure. And that's a great question to be able to ask. Now, another one would be, obviously, are you available on the weekends? That's sort of a minor one. I don't know if you're open on the weekends, but if you are, you'd want to know if the person's available. But I like this one because as far as California labor laws go, it's actually illegal to ask if somebody has kids or they have a spouse, right? We can't ask that question. There's other ways that we can sort of frame it, and I'll tell you why you might want to do this. Obviously, we want to be legal and we want to be compliant and we want to ask reasonable, ethical questions. So this question here, if your child awoke with a minor fever before you left for work, what would you do? Now, oftentimes the answer you'll get to that question is, well, I don't have children, so that doesn't apply to me. So there you go. You could flush out that answer. But more importantly, it shows you how somebody can think on their feet, because here's what we don't want to have happen. Let's say that you had a day like I had yesterday, where immediately when I got to the office, I was adjusting, I was seeing patients, and we had new patients there already. So right out of the gates, I knew, okay, this is going to be a busy day. I need to be on my game. I'm going to be seeing a lot of patients. We have new patients. We want to make a great first impression with the memorable welcome. And what if my CA called in sick? Ooh, that's going to be hard, right? Because I have the stage set for a high performance, great level of service day. And suddenly, if somebody's unavailable, that's going to leave me in a really tough spot. So we want to make sure that we're asking questions that show us what happens when an applicant is put into a tight spot. Now, a great answer to that would be either number 1, I don't have children, and that may not apply. I mean, I think all my CAs, almost all my CAs have children, which is great. But an answer could be is, I have dependable childcare, right? So maybe, my mom could watch the kids, or my mother-in-law could watch the kids, or something like that, to where they say, you know what, I will be at work and I don't have those kinds of interruptions that affect my schedule. Okay, so there you go. That's another one. Another question, are you goal-oriented, right? So that shows somebody who's proactive towards goals. I mean, my office is really structured around goals. We just went through our annual meeting, and we have our clear-cut goals set for the entire year for all of 2023. So we're excited about these goals. But if I'm interviewing somebody, I want to know, are they going to be excited about having goals too? Or is it something they have zero experience with? Or are they just not excited about that? So this is a question that would flush that out. Another question, how would your previous or current boss describe your best performance? And then they'll tell you, well, I'm really good at this. They love it when I do that. I get my work done quickly. I'm always on time. Whatever that is, fantastic. That's great. How would they describe your worst performance? Let them share that with you. So these are great questions. There's more in there, but I'll let you read through those and use those. Now, as it follows up here, the doctor's going to ask the final questions. And I just like this one from the standpoint of chiropractic care. What is your opinion of our current healthcare system? Now, there's really no wrong answer to this, but as it says on the screen, a nice answer would be, I prefer natural versus prescription or medical solutions, right? I'm more naturally oriented, which you'll hear oftentimes when you're interviewing, but it's just a nice way to sort of ask, what is their general impression? Now, if they say, I love how the pharmaceutical industry runs healthcare because I'm invested heavily into pharmaceutical stocks, and I think vaccines are the best thing since sliced bread. Well, you have to decide if that's a good fit for who you want representing you in your practice. I'll leave that up to you. But this is a great way to sort of just give an open-ended question and then see how they respond to that. So those are the key questions that are going to help you to perform this panel interview and to really make sure, as I said, where you have somebody come in, you have a group of people asking them questions, they get to be in the spotlight, so you get to see how they perform under pressure. Everybody asks questions, the applicant gets to ask questions, and it's done in a short, efficient amount of time. And you'll really see quickly where somebody performs well under pressure or somebody sort of melts and falls apart. You'll see that quickly with this interview. And that's why it's so important. So with that, I think, let's see, I want to actually just take a moment to show you on the website. I was going over this with one of our new members, so I just want to share this with you because this is a really cool feature that we have for all of you to be able to utilize this. Now, obviously, we have our success rate reports, which is in the My Practice tab at the top. And in this section, you can see your success rates. Now, what will happen is the success rates don't show on these graphs until the month is completed. So in other words, now that we're in February, you'll see where we completed the month of January. And as the year starts to move along, you'll see either your actual numbers falling above or below your target line. The gold is your target line. That's your goal. So you want to make sure that you're tracking along with this and watching your progress towards your goals, right? Down at the bottom here, it actually shows what the success rates are for each one of those categories, and you can track more specifically in that way. Okay, so I just wanted to show you that. But where I was going with all this is anytime if you have a question, please let us know. If you click on the Contact Us page, you can actually type in a message here. You can schedule a training call or a coaching call. You can get in touch because I want to be available for you as much as possible so that you have all the tools that you need to maintain a successful practice. So please take advantage of that and let us know. Actually, let me jump out of the PowerPoint here. There we go. Oh, actually, yeah. Okay, here we go. I'm almost ready to jump out of the PowerPoint, but not quite yet. Sorry about that, because I want to just give you a heads up in terms of what our topic is going to be next week. But more to the point, I was going to show you next week will be our final interviews. So that's where we're going next week. But back to my, there we go. Back to me. So as I was saying, we'll continue this on into next week. But use those tools I was just showing you because we have the weekly webinars, we have email, we have the training calls. You can utilize all those, and some of you are really doing a great job with that. So I'm really happy to be here and help you. Okay, so with that, let's go ahead and chime in with any questions that you have. I want to welcome a new doctor to DC Trainings, and that's Dr. Matthew Glynn. So Dr. Glynn, are you, I'm going to go ahead and try to open up your line so that you can just ask any questions, but go ahead. Are you able to open your line? Or let's see. I see you have two mics. I'm not sure why that is, but let me see which one you can open up. You there? Nope. Okay. Well, when you get ready, just let us know, but all you got to do is open your line and then I'll be happy to talk to you. I do have a question though from one of our docs, and that's Dr. Janji. So Dr. Janji, are you there?
Hello, hello.
Hi, Dr. George. Welcome.
Thank you. How are you doing, Doc?
Great. Yes, very good.
Good. I'm happy to hear that. I have a general question about tier systems for insurances. I don't exactly know which tier I'm on, but is it true that if uh, that like I guess the higher up you go rank wise, that your medical necessities won't be subjugated at like 5 visits for ASH plans?
Okay, so that I was wondering if that's where you're going. So when you talk about tiers, you're talking specifically about ASH, right? American Specialty Health.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have to look at the contract. There's a lot of real problems with American Specialty Health, although they aren't so significant that you shouldn't participate. It's perfectly fine to be participating with ASH. You just have to know how to work within the structure of their contractual requirements. So when you say yes, when you get in the upper tiers, do they require those medical necessities? And the answer is no, they don't. Which is nice, right? So you're thinking, okay, if I get up into a tier 4, I think it's 5 and 6, there's 6 tiers altogether. When I get up into a tier 5 or 6, I won't have to submit medical necessity. And that is correct, except if you look in the contract, in the fine print, you will see that each year when they look at the average number of visits that each one of the patients was seen for, if it falls up, I think it's at or above 6 visits annually, then you will be dropped a tier. So they have this catch-all. So on the front end, they say, try to work your way up through the tiers, which means keep your visits low for your patients, get them fixed and out the door quickly, and that'll allow you to move up in tiers. But the other catch on that, and of course the incentive is then I won't have to do as much reporting and file these clinical necessity forms. But then on the general stand of it, they just let you know in the contract, if you go above 6 visits on an annual basis, you will be dropped a tier. So therein lies the problem. Because if you were to get in the higher tiers and think, oh, great, I can see all the patients now for all the visits that their plans allow for, no, because they'll fall back on that you went above 6 visits on average.
Okay, great. And how can I navigate the whole medical necessity conversation with my patients then? Like, like I have a couple patients who called their insurance company and was like, okay, so like I have 20 visits a year, but Dr. Janji said I have 5, and that's because I don't want to do that medical necessity. So how do I navigate this conversation with my patients?
Yes, great question. You don't say it like that. The way that you navigate it is just to be honest about it, because what happens with ASH is that without submitting the clinical necessity reports, they deem basically every patient after 5 visits to be on what's called wellness care. Right now, you can submit a medical necessity request letting the insurance know that you don't want this patient to transfer over to wellness care. But in the absence of that report, they assume that after 5 visits, every patient is now on wellness care, which they don't cover. So that's the conversation that you want to have with your patient. Just let them know that by default, the way your insurance company views every patient is that after 5 visits, unless the doctor submits a report, that they will be deemed as maintenance visits or wellness care, and that's not a covered service. So then, of course, the patient's going to say, well, then why not just submit the report and let them know I'm not on maintenance care? And therein lies the problem with the contract, because the contract, and this isn't what I'm telling the patient, this is what I'm telling you, the doctor, right now. The contract is watermarked on every single page saying, do not disclose this information to a patient or you'll be disqualified from the network. So you can't give them a copy of the contract that we signed to be a provider for ASH, or we'll get kicked out. But in the contract is the very language that would let the patient know why they're not going to be able to use all their benefits. So it's a real catch-22. I'll stop there.
So yeah, I mean, like I said, I have I have two right now that they're expecting me to fill out this medical necessity. So like, I just don't know I don't know how to voice this part and like one of them already told me like she's not going to pay my cash rate. So I'm like, I guess I'm going to lose this patient if I don't think of what to say.
Well, okay, so this, you'll learn about this in module 3 with the report of findings. But since we're on the topic right now, whenever a patient is really focused around the money part, you want to go back to their condition, their primary concerns, and all the effects, and say, I understand that the cost is a factor, and obviously you want to use your insurance. You pay a lot of money for it. But let's for a moment just remember, this is what you came in with. You came in with this condition, and it's affecting you in these ways. And these are all the effects that that's having on you. Now, if you let that condition continue to worsen, where is that going to leave you in 5 years? Or where's that going to leave you in 10 years? Or where's that going to leave you in 6 months? Obviously, it's a declining trajectory. So what we need to do is we need to really focus on getting your condition stabilized and turning this sinking ship around and getting it going in the right direction. And at the same time, we need to work with you within the parameters of your insurance. And unfortunately, with your insurance, they have a clause where after 5 visits, they deem the care that you're receiving as maintenance care, which they don't cover. And if I submit a report letting them know that you need more than that per medical necessity, that flags me as a problem office or a problem doctor, whereby I could potentially be removed from the network by seeing you for more than 6 visits on an annual basis. So we have a real catch-22 here, but the main focus needs to be what you came in with. You came in with a health problem, a serious condition, and we need to focus on getting that taken care of for you, which we have ways of doing that.
Okay, that helped a lot. Thank you.
That's the conversation. And then just to follow that up, in module 4, when we get into financial arrangements and overcoming, objections or challenges, I'll show you how to create a modified care plan where you can really work with any patient's budget, and it sort of pulls them away from the insurance mindset and more into, I'm taking responsibility for my health. I'm going to pay for it as long as it's within my means, and then you're fine.
For sure. Okay. Thanks.
Of course, you're welcome. Yeah, great question. I'm going to go back to let's see, Dr. Glenn. I guess
Hey,
I'm
here now, Docs. Yeah, I'm here now.
All right, Dr. Matt. Great. Welcome to the call, and welcome to DC Trainings.
Thank you. Excited.
Just wanted to, connect with you and of course, welcome you, and also check in and see if you have any questions that I can answer, or if there's any topics that we can expand on.
No, just listening to the hiring process this morning, kind of made me feel like I wouldn't even qualify for the job. So it just seems like the whole streamlined process saves us a lot of pain later on, hiring the wrong people, putting the wrong people in the wrong positions.
It certainly does.
Yeah.
I shared an interesting fact last week on our webinar, where I was explaining how a mishire will cost you, the employer, 10 times their salary. So whatever the price is that you pay a CA, just know that by hiring the wrong CA, you're actually losing 10 times whatever you pay them in lost productivity, lost patients, et cetera. So it really pays to do these steps correctly and to find the right person. And, a lot of it may not be upfront skills. A lot of it's just heart and tenacity, right? So, if somebody is really tenacious and they say, I may not have experience, I may not really know what I'm getting into yet, but I'm willing to work hard and I'm going to give it everything I've got, then you can train them. And I'll, of course, with DC trainings, I'll show you how to train them. We have a great training system, but it's really about where they're at in their heart. Like, are they really excited to do this? And then they'll get the job. And that's the same, like you said, if you're afraid that you wouldn't qualify. I mean, you went through chiropractic school. You obviously have the heart of a chiropractor. That's huge.
Right. Yeah. And I feel like that's really what I'm looking for whenever I go to hire someone, somebody who's a lot like me.
Yep. You'll attract like-minded people that way. So, well, great. Well, any other questions or anything I can expand on?
No, I just look forward to our call this evening.
Yes, absolutely. I'll talk to you then. And again, thanks for welcome to DC Trainings. Thanks for joining. All right. So let's wrap up today. And this is great because, by continuing this sequence, I know some of you are actually hiring as I'm teaching this. But as we go through this, you'll not only learn, if you're learning for the first time, you'll learn these big chunks and how to do this. But every time we do this, I know there's certain little things that you sort of pick up on. So my methodology when I join a podcast or join a webinar or go to a seminar is I bring my pencil and paper. And if I can just take 2 things away from that, then it's a win-win for me. If I can just have 2 things that I'm going to implement when I get back on Monday or when I get back to the office the next day, or if I'm in the office, I can implement that day, then that has been a successful education tool, right? So, and that's kind of how our practices work. We just keep incrementally adding and adding and adding, and then pretty soon we look at what we've created and we say, wow, this is just a well-oiled machine. It's great. I'm at the level of service I want to be at. I'm collecting the income that I want to collect, and it's running on autopilot. And that's the beauty of DC trainings in terms of how we teach you these sequences. So thank you for joining today, and I'll look forward to talking to you next week.
If you would like to become a member of DC Trainings, be sure to head on over to dctrainings.com to get started today.